What's up, everybody? So I have one question for you. What is the difference between Eminem and Miley Cyrus? Well, we know Eminem has balls and Miley Cyrus does not. In other words, Eminem has the male reproductive system, whereas Miley Cyrus has the female reproductive system, right? Now, okay, so what are you trying to get at? The male reproductive system is gonna make this sperm, right? This male sex cell, whereas the female reproductive system will make this egg, right? We call that oogenesis. Whereas for the sperm, we call it spermatogenesis. Now, when the sperm and the egg comes together, what do we call that? We call that fertilization, right? And now that egg that now has the DNA of both the egg plus the sperm, the mom and the dad, that will become the baby, right? In pregnancy, it will develop and divide until you have a full-grown baby, right? Now notice how I have a sun next to all of these names. That's because I made a video on each of these. Okay, so if you don't understand spermatogenesis, fertilization, pregnancy, oogenesis, don't worry, I make a video on each of these topics individually. But for this video, we're going to look at this little thing right here, the female reproductive system, and try and talk about the parts and all the key things about it. So here we have it. So basically zooming into that female reproductive system, right? So this is how it would look like. This is real. It looks kind of weird, right? It looks like a little thing with like long arms holding a little ball, right? It looks kind of weird. But it is actually pretty cool how it works. So let's get started. So the female reproductive system is a 3D thing, right? So what we're going to do is, because we can't see what's going on inside, in reality, in here is stuff, in here is stuff, in this little pipe there's stuff. So what we're going to do to be able to see that is we're going to cut this thing right open. We're going to slice it open right so we can see what's going on inside, okay? So here we go. We slice it open so we can see what's going on the inside, right? So remember, in reality, this whole area is closed. It's like a little bag. It's actually closed. It's not open, but we sliced it open so we can see what's going on the inside. Okay. So you can try labeling as much as you can by yourself, because now we're going to do exactly that. So here we go. Yeah, I think I'm trying to get it to the right spot. Yeah, that's good. There's a few things we need to know. Okay, all of these little arrows that I labeled. And we're going to describe these, we're going to label these things as I describe the process. Okay, so let's start. We know that this little thing here, this one right here, what is this? This is called your what? Your ovary. Your ovary. And what's this purpose? This is a little bag, okay? We don't see the inside of it right now, but there's a little bag, and it's called the ovary. And what it does is, this is the place where the egg is going to be made. It's basically, in simple terms, it's like the female balls. You know, in a male, the balls or the testes is the place where sperm is made. This is basically the female ball, so we call it the ovary, and this is where the egg is going to be made, or the ova. You can also call the egg the ova. Now, after the egg is made in this ovary, it's going to be released. And basically what's going to happen is this little pipe, it's going to go into this little pipe. Okay, it's going to be released, and this little pipe is going to catch it, and it's going to go in here. Now, this little pipe has a name that you need to know, and it's called the fallopian tube. It has two names, actually. We'll get to it. I'll make this longer. Give me a sec. So it basically has two names that you need to know. Fallopian tube and oviduct. They're both the same thing. Both the same name, just synonyms, okay? Fallopian tube and oviduct. But they're both the same thing. It's like the fallopian tube is like in the female, you know, in the male, the sperm is made in the testes. I can go back to this picture. It's made in this testes, and it's carried up by this duct called the sperm duct, right? So this is basically the same thing, but in the female. So it's called the oviduct, and it's going to carry it now up. Now, the egg will stop here. It will stay here for a long time. It won't move through this entire tube, or this entire fallopian tube. It will just stay here for a while, okay? Then, now let's go to the next part. So we know the sperm, meanwhile, comes from the male, right? The male. How does the sperm enter the female reproductive system? Through the vagina, right? The penis will go into the vagina, the sperm will be released. So this right here is the vagina. Okay? This right here. So the sperm is released into here, the vagina. Okay? So, and then after it's released into vagina, it will travel in through this little thin gap here. You notice this little thinner part here. You see how it's a big part here, the vagina, and then we have this massive area here. It's basically this part in between, this little passageway. We call this passageway the cervix, okay? So to be clear here, the male reproductive system, the penis, will go into this area. It cannot enter this area. This area is far too far inside, okay? So it's going to be this area only. So the male reproductive system will enter here, release sperm into right here. Then the sperm needs to swim. Remember, it can swim. So it's going to swim through this little area, the cervix, which is like a little gate, a small little pipeway that it has to travel through in between the vagina and this part. So it goes through and it reaches in here. What do we call this area here? We call this area the uterus. The uterus. So again, in summary, sperm comes in here through the vagina, and then it has to pass this little thin area called the cervix into the uterus. Now what? Remember this, the egg is all the way here. We want the sperm to meet the egg. So the sperm will now swim through, what do we call this? We call this the oviduct, or this fallopian tube. And it swims until it reaches the egg, and it will fertilize the egg in a video that I'll talk about in another video, right? So it fertilizes, and now it forms this egg that has both the DNA from the egg and the sperm, right? And this thing will then develop into the baby. So it travels, and this will basically, now this fertilized egg, remember it was fertilized by the sperm, will now travel and come into the uterus, and specifically it's going to go into this wall. You notice this little barrier, this wall. This is called the endometrium. So the egg is going to implant in this thin layer here, and this is where it's going to grow. Okay, why does this make sense? Because this little thing here, this little thick layer here, okay, is called the myometrium, and you don't need to know that, so don't worry about that. But it's going to have all the vessels and nutrients and everything to supply this egg. So the egg is going to implant into this layer, this endometrium, so that it can get all the nutrients it needs from this wall, and develop and grow into a baby, okay? But you don't need to know more than that. Now, out of curiosity, you may wonder, what the heck is this? This right here is a little ligament, a little kind of string that holds this ovary in place, because this ovary is in fact not attached to this fallopian tube. It's actually not attached. It's only next to it, but it's not attached to it. Nothing is connecting this ovary and this fallopian tube. They're only next to each other, but not attached. So in reality, without this little pipe, this little string, this ovary will just float around everywhere. So this little string is very important to keep this ovary in place. So don't get confused. This ovary is not held into place by this tube. It is held into place by this little string, okay? That's very important to understand. So that is really what you need to know about the female reproductive system, all the parts you need to know. Now, again, I didn't write down the sentences here to explain what these little things do, but it should make sense based on what I said. And here I have the definitions written out in a simple way for you to understand, okay, in case you missed out on some stuff. Now, I'm only teaching you this, why? Because it's going to come up on the IB. Here is an example of an IB question. So this just shows how you need to know this. Draw a labeled diagram of the adult female reproductive system, and it's 4 points, and trust me, I saw this question come up a whole bunch, so you need to know this. Here they are, and it's exactly the same things that we talked about. So I just draw it a couple times, and I'm sure you'll get it.